I didn't put Coach Ratliff at the end. He chose this time slot. No, I knew that people would leave. It just happens. You guys are in for a treat. All these presentations are great. Anybody, my Kevin Bacon story is that I watched him play in, did you play anywhere before Murphy Candler? So he was playing at Murphy Candler with his dad, went on to have a really good career at Walton High School, went on to have an even better career at Loyola, captain the team, win a national championship, go on to play pro if nobody's been to a Blaze game. Did anybody have more goals as a long stick committee than you? No. I mean, this guy didn't just bring the ball and take a shot. He brought the ball down, stayed on the field, and stayed in the offense because he was a threat. But my other Kevin Bacon thing is I actually played. Do you know I played against your dad?
I did.
Twice.
1974.
No, I was still in high school. 77 and 78. I was a lowly second midfielder. His dad was a two-time All-American defenseman at Maryland. And yes, we lost both games, but I was on the same field. So with that, Coach Ratliff, thank you for coming out.
All right. Hello, how are we doing? Hey, Scott. So I know I'm the last one. I appreciate you guys hanging out for me here. So, my goal is I've got a couple things I want to talk through. Hopefully not repetitive or different maybe than some other things you've heard. But then I really want to leave as much time as possible at the end for questions. So just
space.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of space. I'm going to talk, but no. Yeah. But I think really I want to give you guys what you want. So if there are any questions or things that you want to be thinking of, I will leave plenty of time at the end to kind of talk about that. So my topic is kind of the fundamentals of defense, and I really want to focus specifically on the younger levels and really getting started. I think the best place to start is with stick skills. So I guess before I go, probably my favorite thing about this game, and something that I always feel kind of compelled or obligated to say when I speak at these sorts of things, is it's creative. And there's no two sticks in the entire world that are the same, and there's no two players that play the same way. And I had a coach at Loyola named Matt Dwan, and I probably would say he's, at least in terms of the lacrosse aspect of it, the guy that I learned the most from about this game. And what I thought was really unique and really special about him was when you got there, you hear a lot of college programs or college coaches or coaches in general, you come into their program and it's this is how we play, we do things this way. And it was really obvious with Coach Dwan that he would take whatever you were good at and he would help you be better at it. So there was never a my way or the highway mentality with him. It was, I came in and I was really good at offense and some different things, and so he worked, with me to improve defensive stuff, but then he also found ways to kind of enhance what I could already do. And I was always really appreciative of that. I think without a coach like that, I never would have had the success I could have. So I say that as I stand up here and speak about my opinion or philosophy on stick work with the long pole, on how we approach and the angles we take and how we throw checks. There's probably 10 other coaches that could tell you completely different. And I think a perfect example is, I've been to a lot of these with Jerry Byrne, who's a defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, and his techniques and strategies couldn't be more far off than a lot of the things that I teach, the ways that I do things. So, Notre Dame and Loyola both have top 10 defenses every year, and I just think it's really important as coaches that we remember that and we're open to changing, or to kids who play different ways, or to trying some new things. So with that, the first thing I wanted to talk about, and obviously it's the fundamentals of defense, is stick skills. And I came straight here from working with 2 middle school age teams, and what you just see, and it just kills me so often, is, okay, new to the game, big kid, athletic, stick him on defense. As long as he can stay in front of somebody, he can play. And the truth is that you can't. If you can't catch and you can't throw, you can't play. And I think that applies at every position. I don't care if you're the goalie, you're a defenseman, you're a face-off guy, you have to be able to catch and throw. And my dad used to always talk about, it's not a cause turnover until you pick the ball up. Being able to knock the ball out of people's stick is great, but if you can't pick it up and we can't clear it to the other end of the field, what's the point? It's worthless. And we were taught at Loyola, if you don't clear above 90%, you're not going to win the game. Okay, and I talked about that with my guys at GAC a lot. A failed clear is a goal. right? Second chance opportunities. If we dig in, we get a stop, and then we give the ball back, on top of most likely it's going to be a transition situation coming at you, having to sit down and get a stop again is extremely hard. So kind of neglecting stick work and stick skills with the defensive players, I think, is a huge mistake starting from the youngest age. It has to be made clear that you are lacrosse players, everything that they can do with their stick, you're expected to be able to do with your stick, and I'll talk about some ways that we could probably help with doing that. So really important that we spend time on stick work, just as much time as the offense is going to spend on stick work. Again, at a practice at Loyola, that same hour span that offense is doing, star drill and shooting, whatever else, we're doing maybe some different drills, and I'll talk through some of them tailored to our stick work, but we're doing stick work. We're not down there banging heads, we're not down there just doing strictly footwork. All right, we had our sticks in our hands all the time, and the expectation on our stick skills and our wall ball routines was the exact same as it was for an attackman or for a midi. All right, the first thing I think that can put a lot of kids behind on stick work, and I want to just address it right away, is the length of the stick. So, Coach mentioned I play a lot of offense, so I'm probably a little more unique than most of my counterparts, but I cut my stick down still. Right? I'm about 6 feet tall, which is, the normal stick would be about this height, and I play with a stick that comes up to my eyes. And that came from a suggestion from a coach, Jamie Monroe, who's at Denver for a long time, coaching the pros with the Atlanta Blaze for a brief period, and he said, who do you think you want to play like the most? Who do you look up to the most? And I told him Brody Merrill. Brody Merrill's 6'4", so he stares the top of his stick kind of right in the eyes when it's a full-size stick. So he said, why wouldn't you cut your stick down so it's proportional so you can do all the same things with your stick that he does with his? I was really hesitant to try it. I tried it immediately. I felt like I improved. Better control, picking the ball off the ground, quicker hands, intercepting passes, and I don't feel the difference losing, about 6 inches defensively. So I, again, still cut down my stick to this day, and obviously I'm a little taller than it, but what I would suggest or what I recommend to youth players is not to play with a stick that's taller than you. Now, when they get into high school and you're 5'8", and you're a high school kid and you've got strong wrists, okay, maybe you can play with a 6-foot stick. I'm really more talking about that middle school age. You're 4th grade, 5th grade, getting started in the game, and you're running around with a long stick that you just can't really fully handle. You're going to stunt your growth in terms of your stick work, right? So I know these things are expensive, and I'm lucky and I get a lot of them for free, so I'm always sensitive to that when I tell people to cut their sticks and the kid's growing. But I do think that kind of finding that sweet spot, if it's a little taller than them, you cut it to an inch taller than them, and then they have that time to grow that inch, and then maybe another inch they can be taller than it, and the stick can last. But I really, really recommend cutting down the sticks. I mean, when I coach kids, the deep holes that do have their sticks cut down are almost always the one with the better stick work. Okay, so playing with a stick that, again, is around your height, as you grow, your kind of stick can grow with you, and then I think it's less about height. Once you get to that high school age, it's more just about your wrist strength. But again, my players at GAC, I've got a long stick midi that is about my height, and he plays with the same length stick that I do. I mean, I would continue to encourage that all the way up, because I just found that I have much better control playing with a shorter stick. All right, so got that length of the stick down. So the next thing that I think is key to teaching stick work with the youth is understanding where on your stick your hands should be. Okay, so I tape my stick accordingly to how I want to set up my hands. I know it's black, so it's hard to see, but I go about halfway up with my tape, all right, and then the top is nice and smooth. The reason I do this is when I'm playing defense, I like a nice wide cross-check grip, and I'm going to get into talking about that in a little bit, right? So the top of my hand is at the top of my tape, my bottom hand's at the bottom of my stick. Now, when I pick it up and I run over the midline, I slide up, and now my bottom hand grabs the top of the tape. So anytime I'm kind of controlling the ball or doing stick work, especially in the offensive half of the field, right? If I'm playing with other short poles around me, or I'm throwing a pass in traffic, or I'm being defended by an attackman and I'm trying to get away, my bottom hand is in the middle of my stick, and then my top hand is all the way up here, 3-4 inches off of the plastic, and that's where I'm going to play. Now maybe this throw I'll slide them down a little bit, and I think every kid has kind of their comfort level there, but I'm constantly telling kids higher, higher, get your hands up higher on the stick. Right, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So I'll go into talking about some of the stick work with our hands down here, but to start, when we teach offense and we get into star drill, right, what do we always say? Throw it in the box, throw it in the box. And we teach all of our offensive players that this is where you're going to pass to. Well, if I come running down the field like this and somebody throws me a pass right here, I can't catch it, I'm jammed. right? So instead of making 5 offensive players adjust where they're throwing the ball to me, I'm going to adjust so I can catch it in the same place that we're asking them to catch it, right? And when you do this, you see a lot of times kids go grabbing for it, and you develop bad habits. If it's not a really high pass, you're going to develop bad habits catching the ball because you're going to have to reach for it. So I don't care if it's a cross-field pass, an outlet for my goalie, or I'm over the midline and I'm playing offense. When I'm catching the ball, my hands are up here, and I'm able to catch it right by my head, right? A huge thing with over the shoulders. Kids are running over the shoulder like this. I mean, this is hard still for me to be able to peg the ball out of the air using this entire stick. When I break out over the shoulder, I'm here with my hand, again, about 6 inches from the top of the stick, so that that thing comes right by my head, I can catch it. Right? It's much easier for me to go from here and extend my stick out to catch a bad pass than it is to be running like this and try to pull it in to catch a pass that's in on my body. Okay, so just developing the habit really early on that you're not playing defense and the ball's not in your stick, your hands are up here, right? Up nice and high on the stick, ready to catch the ball. Now there is a few times where I would say kind of using the length of the stick can be to our benefit. So those times, one would be a cross-field pass. Right, I break out for my goalie and I've got to make a 30 or 40-yard pass. You get a little more leverage with the long pole. It's kind of easier to make those passes, throwing it with the length of the stick. Same thing if it's a long pass upfield. My middy's breaking upfield, it's 20, 30 yards between us. Okay, I may use my full stick and I may throw it, right? But as soon as I get within 10 to 15 yards of who I'm throwing it to, it's also very tough to catch passes that are coming out of the long pole with your full hands. You can choke up and get comfortable passing from here, much easier catch for the middies, and I think it's a much more accurate way of throwing the ball as well. So if it's not a cross field, if it's not a pass up field, obviously certain situations maybe you're protecting your stick and you've got to get rid of it, of course. But if I've got time and space and I'm throwing a regular pass, again, my bottom hand is on that top of my tape, right in the middle of my stick. My top hand is up here, and I keep no tape up here so I can slide my hands around. Right, I like to be able to move my hands a lot, whether it's ground balls, whether it's dodging, whether it's making a pass. So down here is kind of the tape and the death grip, and then up here is the nice smooth grip so I can slide my hands all up and down the stick. All right? The next place that I think choking up is under-taught, or at least we don't see it enough, is on ground balls. All right, so I go back to, I mentioned Brody Merrill, and I was lucky enough to play with him for a couple years in Boston, and the first thing I noticed, the first time I practiced with him, was the way that he held his hands when he went for ground balls. And anybody that follows him, he's the best, I think, ever at finding ways to pick up ground balls. And what I noticed was his top hand on ground balls was very often up at the top of his stick. Right? You're in no traffic, you're in space. Perhaps I'm running at a ball and somebody's behind me. Great, I'm going to use the whole stick. I'm not going to bend down as far. I'm going to be able to get it up quicker. Wonderful. Okay, or maybe somebody's beating me to the ball, so I need to reach to try to land a check or deuce the ball. Wonderful. But when we would be in scrums on face-offs, and there's a lot of people around, what I would see Brody do is he would slide his hand up just a little bit, his bottom hand would come just a little bit off the stick, but then his grip would widen from your normal grip to all the way out here. And he'd go in for the ground ball with his hands wide. And what this does is it creates a natural kind of stick protection with your elbows and with your shoulders. So when he's coming out of traffic with ground balls and we're all whacking at him, he's just soaking all the checks on the back of his arm until he gets to space and wants to pass it, and then his hands would slide up, again, about to this area. Okay, so any ground ball in traffic, I'm teaching choke up, right? And maybe not choke up to the point like I'm talking about with your bottom hand in the middle of the stick. That does leave a lot of butt end that they can mess with, but bottom hand up a little or maybe not at all, but your top hand goes up. Right? It gives you way more control on the ball, kind of gives you that ability to power cradle, and again, it widens your upper body and protects your stick better so that you can get out of traffic. Okay? The last kind of trick on protecting the stick on ground balls that I learned from Brody was the other thing he would do is when he was running into a ground ball and I was behind him, right, and again, trying to lift the backhand, trying to check the backhand, trying to disturb him, and this is maybe not something that you're going to teach right away at the youth level, but if you have a kid who has the ability, he would take his bottom hand off the stick, straighten his arm out, and pick up the ground ball with his top hand. And then the bottom hand's right back on. Right? And I know one-handed ground balls are the ultimate sin or whatever, but I like it when we pick them up. Right? So top hand in the middle of the stick, I'm getting harassed with my back hand, I'll just ward, take my back hand off, protect the stick a little bit, get the ball up, back hand right back on, and then I'm sliding my hands up. Okay, and I talked about, and I'll probably talk about Brody a lot because a lot of what I learned with the fundamentals are from him. But when he would go in and he would pick up those ground balls with that wide grip, when he would get out of the traffic, it was his bottom hand that would then slide up. It wasn't top hand down, and now I'm using the whole stick again. It was ground ball, power cradle into space, bottom hand slides up, and now he's right here. Right? And we all used to always joke, every time he threw us the ball, it was as if it was a dad throwing it to his kid for the first time. He's looking at you, he's balanced, a couple cradles, and then it's like a nice, easy pass right into your stick. And it seemed weird at the time, but the more you play with him, the more you realize he never turned the ball over. It was an extreme appreciation for valuing the ball and for protecting the ball, that he was going to make sure he was choked up, he wasn't going to throw you awkward, weird passes with his full stick, he was going to get his hands high, he was going to be turned sideways, and he was going to deliver a really catchable pass. Okay, so I think that's extremely hard to do, again, if our hands aren't moved up on the stick. I'll pause there before I kind of jump forward a little bit and just see if there are any questions or anything that I missed on that. Go ahead.
So are you going to go over how you shoot?
Yeah, sure. You know, it's not on my, I'm not hard to convince to talk about shooting. It's not on my, it's not on my schedule, but I'll find some time for that.
When you're playing so high on the pole and you catch the ball, how do you make a quick transition to not? Because all of the shorties are going out the butt end. They're all taught to go out the butt end of the stick.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent question. I'm glad you asked. So my thinking with that is it's far more important to protect this part of the stick than this part. If my top hand is high and a perfect butt end check connects, I can still turn my wrist and cradle out of that check. Right? So a lot of times that butt end's going to pull my stick this way. My top hand's high enough, cradle out of it, ball's not going to go anywhere. So I really just frankly don't worry that much about protecting my butt end. Now, a really good riding attackman gets in there and lifts. Yeah, that can cause you some problems. But with the slap checks and the wrap checks, if you've got that good high grip, I usually feel like I'm able to cradle out of it. It's the checks up here that are going to take the ball away. The only other thing, and you see this a lot, and again, I wouldn't rush to teach this at the youth level, but a kid who's using a proportionate stick, when your top hand is high, I don't think there's a ton of harm in throwing it in one hand. And I think people shy away from that, but if you watch Joel White, right, if you watch Brody Merrill, if you watch the best players in the world with the long pole, they put it in one hand and protect it like this. So, right, the kid's got to be able to do it, and we've got to develop the skill set, but I find that to be a great method of protection. If I'm going to go like this, look how much of my stick is showing, compared to if I'm like this. It's a lot more protected. I can keep it over here, I can keep it over here, and kind of use my body to try to keep some of those checks away. But if his hand is not used to being this high on the stick, that's not going to work. Right? Joel White's the best in the world at this, and he was an attackman. His top hand's on the plastic when he does it. Right? I can't be down here trying to cradle with one hand. I'm not going to have the wrist strength. I'm going to lose control of it. But again, if I'm really comfortable with my top hand up high, I'm running, I'm cradling, nobody's there, I'm feeling these whacks on my butt end, I'll just throw it out for a second until I get away, and then I'll get my hands back on.
I think that's a good, if you cut your stick down, that's another advantage that you had.
Exactly, because your butt end's not going to get caught up on the ground. That's exactly right.
You talk about the long poles being able to do the same thing as the shorties. To that end, how important, I guess, what are your thoughts on a deep pole being able to use two hands, and does it change if you are a deep pole versus a long stick?
Awesome, that's another really good question. So, my thinking again is probably a little dangerous on this, and a lot of coaches wouldn't appreciate it, but I don't think it's hugely important. Now, I had a dad who stressed it, made me learn it, and I certainly use my left hand, and there's times I think you have to. But what I teach kids is, if you can do it in your strong hand, and it's going to give you more confidence that it's going to get done, that the pass is going to be caught, then why are we switching, right? And the way that I'll kind of speak to that is, I work on a lot of backhanded flips. Okay, so I pick up a ground ball. If I can make the pass like this, instead of switching to my left hand, it's quicker and I'm going to do it. Right? I'm never going to pick up a ground ball with my left hand, so I want to be able to get the ball off the ground and have creative ways to use my right hand. Now the other thing is, defensively, as much as I can, I throw passes with my feet set. If I'm throwing a cross-field pass, or I'm trying to hit a midi on the run up the field, I want to be like a quarterback. Even if I roll out of the pocket and I'm running, I try to find that space where I can settle my feet and take a crow hop and step into my pass. If I have the space to do that, then I usually have the space to flip my hips and use my strong hand. Meaning, even if I'm running this way, right, if I've got enough space, I'm going to flip my hips real quick and throw the pass like this. I would rather my guys do that and make a good pass than go left for the point of going left and not make a good pass in that situation. Same goes for breaking out over the shoulder, right? If I'm breaking out over the shoulder full speed and I'm not super comfortable catching like this, you know, I get it, you catch and you're ready to throw, but I'd rather have the guy that catches the ball every time. So turn like this, catch it, turn back upfield and go. Okay, so I know that's not a clear answer to your question. What I tell my guys at GAC, kind of what I believe, if you can't catch on your left hand, you don't use it out here at practice. You got to work on that in your own time, right? And I think, I mean, all the way down to the youth level, of course, we'll spend time at the beginning of practice doing those fundamental stick work drills, making them go with both hands. But then once we get into drills and we're trying to get things going, I don't want to waste a ton of time stopping so guys can work on their weak hand. I'd rather, you know, encourage my guys to get on the wall in your own time. Once you're comfortable catching and throwing lefty, then you bring that out here. Something that really surprised me as I've gotten to the higher levels was how few people really can use both hands. And again, I think it's a huge advantage. I think there's plenty of times where I go left and I'm really glad that I can, but there's also a lot of creative ways to kind of do it righty. So, you know, I think it's not the most important thing to be teaching, you know, to that extent. Good?
Hey Scott, it's a little off the subject, but changing hands playing D, probably don't want to do that.
Yeah, playing defense, yeah, and I'm going to get into that, but definitely not. And the last thing I'll say is changing hands when you're controlling the ball is a lot of times where you see kids lose being choked up. So I catch it here, I'm choked up, I run, oh, I need to roll and go to my left hand. Well, what a lot of guys want to do when they roll is take their bottom hand off and then replace it on the bottom of the stick. And now way more of my stick is showing out of the roll dodge than when I went into it. Right, and that's really common as the guys kind of roll back to make those cross passes. So again, another thing that's important for me to teach is when I switch hands, it's my bottom hand that comes off. Right, if I'm going to break down, my bottom hand comes off, grabs where the top hand was, so I come out of the roll with my hands equally as choked up as when I went into the roll.
When you all did those 4 mini clinics up at the Marriott, whatever, and Ryan Powell came up from Florida at one time, I don't think you were there.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
And it was disappointing because there was about 12 of us there, but I was amazed how he talked about not using his offhand. He talked about at the higher level, I mean, it was the first time I heard somebody at that level, at your level, say, you know what, we overemphasize using that weak hand. I rarely play with my weak hand. I work with my strong hand. And you see John Grant Jr., and you see a lot of these Canadians. And now I'm almost like flipped that we probably overemphasize at the youth level that you have to use your offhand as opposed to getting really, 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 really good with your strong hand.
Yeah, it's one of these things that's a balancing act, because I think that you see the success of obviously of the Canadians and the box game and its influence on the outdoor game. So I do think to some extent it's true. Where I would argue the difference comes is when you're playing at Loyola or when you're playing in the pros, everybody out there is so good. So you really have your role that you're filling. And Ryan Powell's role is to sit on the right side and catch the ball and bury it. He's not dodging down the lefty alley. He's not going over here to do these other things. So to that extent, I do think it works. I think when you get to the highest level, guys specialize. They have what they're really good at, and that's what they're asked to do. But I think in the youth level, in the high school level, there's tremendous value to be able to use both hands. And in the outdoor game, as you know, as far as it has come with that style of play, the Canadian, a lot of those Canadian players, for us that watch the World Games, when you stick them on a MLL, or I'm going to plug a little bit here, a PLL field, okay? When you stick them on that field, they're not as effective as they are when they're playing for Team Canada. And that's because, again, you have 6 guys out there that are all playing with this style. Righties over here, lefties over here, we're all on the same page. You try to plug one of them in with a guy like Tom Schreiber who's going to dodge either way and skip a pass to you, and you're not really always sure where you're going to be, or you're playing an offense that's asking you to move a little bit more between sides, then all of a sudden you're going to be at a disadvantage. So, you know, it's one of these things like I talked about in the beginning. I think there's a lot of different ways of doing things, and you know, if you have a kid who can go behind the back, can do backhands, can, you know, come over here cross-handed and make plays, awesome, love it, send them to GAC, right? But I also, you know, especially at the midfield position, I think there's a lot of value in I can dodge down either alley, deliver the ball to X, take a shot with either hand. You know, I wouldn't suggest fully abandoning that thought process. I think for attackmen, maybe a little less important than for middies to be able to use both hands, but again, even there, how many attackmen show up to college and are asked to play midfield or
Right.
vice versa. So I stay away from just teaching it that way. But again, if a kid's dropping the ball in his left hand over and over in practice, stop wasting my time. Use your strong hand, catch the ball, go find your local wall, and figure that out. Yep. All right, so I'll quickly, because I'm going to jump to defense after I get out of here, I'll quickly speak to shooting. So philosophy with shooting, not that different than my philosophy with stick work. The first and foremost is I almost never shoot on the run. Okay, I'm always trying to find a way to set my feet. Okay, so what I call a crow hop is, just that fundamental of being able to turn sideways and take that little hop before I shoot. All right, and I work with that relentlessly with my deep holes. With being able to run, it's just like a quarterback. Drops back, run out to the side, go from running to setting your feet and stepping towards your target. Okay, no different running forward. Right, an outfielder, pop fly goes up, he gets behind it so that he can run in, field it, hop, and throw. All right, the fundamentals of my shot are going to be the exact same. First thing I'm thinking about is spacing. If I know I'm coming down to shoot an outside shot, I've got to stay high enough that I can catch a pass, run, crow hop, and shoot without getting a defensive stick on me. So a lot of D guys, they get in the offensive zone, they get a little eager, right, and they get so close down that now when the ball comes back to them, there's a long pull on them right away and it's a turnover. So teaching them to stop outside of the box and to make sure they leave enough space so that they can catch a pass and then they can get into their footwork. All right? I'm going to encourage them to catch the pass like I'm talking about with my hands high. I'm not going to expect my attackman to throw me a feed up here. I'm going to expect him to throw me a feed where he's supposed to, right in the box here. So as I catch it high, I'll take my few steps forward and I'll turn my body. Now while I'm going through this footwork is again why I like this tape, it's that slide. Slide to the bottom, slide to the tape, and now my hands are right back in position to shoot. Okay, so the same time I'm taking my crow hop, that's when my hands are going through that transition from high to low. Any sort of outside shot, I'm trying to get my hands to the bottom of my stick, or at least as close to the bottom as I can kind of naturally get them quickly there. Okay, so I would say probably most of my shots, I'm there and here. Middle of the stick and maybe just a little bit off the bottom of my stick, right? When I think about the shooting style and when I teach it, especially to young kids, I'm a little bit old-fashioned with that where I'm high to low with this long pole. I think we have to take advantage again of being able to get our sticks super high in the air and then throwing it at the ground. And most of the time, if you don't hit them, most goalies will tell you that it's going in. They can't really see it, right? So the two things that I look for, first, to get the height of the stick, I've got to straighten my arms. Before I shoot, both my arms are going to be completely locked out straight, right? And I don't want them locked out back here. I want them locked out up. Right, so my right arm is completely straight. Maybe there's a slight bend in my left arm because it's lower. Right, but as the wrist strength gets stronger, the hands move closer together. Eventually you can get where pretty much both arms are completely straight. Okay, the second thing I'm going to do is when I'm working with kids, I'm going to make sure I'm taking them from here to up here. All right, again, the value of this shot being the height we can send it from. So I don't want their hands down here and then coming sidearm. I want their hands up here and then coming over the top. All right, and then the last thing I teach, and again, I'm lucky to have an equipment sponsor so I can offer heads like this, but if I have a kid who shoots and he breaks his head because his follow-through slams in the ground, I always tell him I'll replace it. Okay, I think the best way to learn a really good shooting form is you've got to follow through into the ground. Right, if I'm using a long pole and I'm following through and my stick's not hitting the ground, I'm not shooting straight overhand. Right, I went to a clinic and I watched Kyle Hartzell talk about shooting. He's probably one of the best shooters of the ball with the long pole, and he always talked about thinking of his stick like a paintbrush, right? If there's a pipe in front of me, and I come 3/4, I'm going to paint a stripe across the pipe. That little stripe is the only opportunity I have to hit that pipe. If I come straight overhand, and my paintbrush goes from the top all the way down to the bottom of the pipe, then the only place I can really miss is high. Can't miss low because it's going to hit the ground and hit the pipe. I'm not going to miss left or right because a well-strung stick's not going to lie to you. It's going to go where you aim it. Okay, so if my release is totally overhand and I can paint the pipe with a stripe, that's how I'm going to try to shoot. Okay, and obviously, coming completely overhand is difficult and it is uncomfortable a little bit. I think most kids and most people feel more comfortable with that 3/4 kind of shot, and I certainly am guilty of shooting that way a lot. But my fundamentals, the way I learned, was straight overhand, follow through into the ground every time. And again, as you build the wrist strength and as you increase your reps, maybe I'll shoot, I go out to practice with a bucket of balls, I'll shoot 3 in a row like that, and then I'll shoot one sidearm. Then 3 in a row like that, and then I'll shoot one underhand. But I always want my muscle memory to come back to that straight overhand, paint the pipe type of release. Okay, so again, understanding my space, staying high enough, working on being able to catch the ball choked up, and then as I go through my footwork, transition my hands to the bottom of the stick, and then arms straight, hands high, follow through into the ground with the stick, kind of get that high to low shot. As I've advanced up, I've tried to practice being able to shoot it high to high or high to low with the same release. So we hear a lot of attackmen. I've listened to the guy, Ratliff, talk a lot about this, but standing there with a bucket of balls and doing the same release 10 times and switching off between high shot, low shot, high shot, low shot. So that's what I kind of add into it. But again, at the youth level early on, I'm really encouraging those bounce shots with a long pole. That's the most effective way. The last thing I'll say to that, I think the other way that I'm able to have a lot of impact on offense is through cutting. Long pole runs down. Even at this point where I've been doing this my whole career, they just forget about you, or they don't think that you're going to cut, or they just disregard you. So timing it, being patient, and then cutting. And the two things with cutting, you have to be able to cut full speed and catch the ball. Right? Like I think of cutting as like being a wide receiver. He can know I'm cutting, but if he can't stay with me, it doesn't matter. I'm going to stutter, slap his stick out of the way, and sprint as fast as I can. So a lot of times it's not even catching him off guard, it's just sprinting on my cut. So being able to catch the ball as fast as I can, and then again, choking up. If I try to cut with my hands down here into the middle of the field, I'm going back to the other side of the field. Right? Got to have my hands up here, have to be able to catch it in by my ear, and then again, being able to shoot with my hands like this. Right? I can't cut in the middle and catch it and try to slide and shoot with my full stick. I've got to be comfortable catching it here and shooting it here. And that's the sort of thing where, I think just the defenseman's got to earn it. Right? I mean, if he can't do that, if he can't handle it like that, for me, it's again, go back to the wall, work on it. I mean, that's kind of the same way that I earned it coming up. So you have to prove the ability to handle those passes, to be able to shoot that way, to understand timing and game situation. But I talk about goals from a long pole. To me, it's a lot like a pick six. Not only are you adding a goal, it's a momentum play. I think it's foolish not to encourage your long poles to understand how they can get involved on the offensive end, because I think it's just only going to make you more dangerous. And a stat to back that is, in my 4 years at Loyola, I didn't score an insane amount, but we never lost a game that I scored in until my senior year. We lost one. Right? And I always just thought it was just a sign of, our transition game was working, and if I can steal a goal, our offense is already pretty good. It gives us that emotional boost, and then obviously it gives you the boost on the scoreboard as well. So, okay.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, setting your feet, and it's something I really like the way you teach is, and it goes a long way with kids, is get on your skateboard. Give them something they can relate to. He really pushes that, and I find myself using that quite often, and I think that works really well. And setting your feet is huge to be able to do any of this stuff.
That's right.
So.
That's right. And that is the term is get on the skateboard so you're sideways. I find that kids in Georgia, the quarterback metaphor usually lands pretty well. Have you ever seen Matt Ryan take a snap and then throw it like this? Right? I mean, it's fundamentals of throwing, whether you play baseball or you play football, is you turn sideways and you step with your lead foot towards your throw. So again, are there game situations where I've got to throw on the run? Of course there are. But if I have the space, I always set my feet to just make sure that it's a good pass.
So what I'm hearing you saying is Kyle Harrison's shooting style is an anomaly, and you would never suggest that.
Well, I'm teaching shooting for long poles.
Okay.
Okay, so if we're in here talking about short pole middies, not at all. I mean, you've got to go down the alley on the run, and you've got to shoot. This is a lot heavier than a short pole. Even, I'm 27, it's still hard for me on the run to get a lot of power on the shot. I use literally the lightest long pole on the market, and it's still hard. I mean, I can't shoot it as hard as a shorty because this is twice the weight. So if I'm trying to shoot on the run with a long pole, I mean, I got to be close to the cage. My hands are usually somewhere up here in the middle of the stick, or else you're just not going to get any power on it. Okay, so totally different with short poles. You're doing a lot more on the run. I'm more mean with long poles. And even, again, in clears, the whole point of running to the corner is that's where the space is. So if I've got space, why throw it on the run? Why not just set my feet, make sure I'm going to do it, right? And then, the same thing with the shooting. If I'm going right down the middle of the field and I got to go on the run, of course I'm going to do it. I'm not going to dodge down the alley, go sideways and jump shot like Kyle Harrison because, again, this stick is just too heavy for me to do that and to get a lot of power on it. Cool. All right, so now I'm going to kind of jump into defense, and again, probably some things that might be a little bit different than we're used to hearing, but the biggest thing that I see that I've been hammering with especially the little guys is the approach. Okay, so the approach is that the initial run up to the dodger, right? And when you're sitting there after a game in college and you break down film and we would get scored on by dodges, 95% of the time it came back to the approach, whether it was the approach angle or what you did with your stick on the approach. So I'm going to talk angles in a second. To start, I'm going to talk about the stick. Mentioned my dad was, kind of old-fashioned, and I always just learned that you stick your stick in his belly and you leave it there, right? And I think that still applies today as much as it ever has. The best defenders I play with, interesting, is several guys from Marquette stand out for me. Liam Burns is a guy who's actually down here in the Atlanta market who's excellent at this, and several more have come out of that program, and Joe Amplo is the USA defensive coordinator, are the best I've seen at this. Everything they do, their stick is in a straight line from their belly button out. Okay, what I see when kids approach and we say get your stick out is I see this a lot, right?
Yeah.
This is no good. Okay, your stick is pointing up towards the sky. That attackman has every opportunity for every dodge in his arsenal, right? The difference between this and this is the difference between him being able to split dodge and him having to do a swim or a roll. And if somebody's initial dodge on me is a swim or a roll, I feel like I'm not gonna get beat, essentially, because it takes time. He swims, I get an opportunity to lift, it takes a little time for him to get into his other hand, it's gonna slow down his process. If somebody can just clean, split right across their face, that's a lot of times you're most susceptible to getting broken off, or it's gonna be harder to stay with him. So my goal on the initial approach is to maximize the length of my stick, so I'm both arms out in front, but then to straighten my stick, right? The other one you see sometimes is this one, where it's still pointing up towards the sky. Okay, so for me, this is just repetition, over and over and over again. I have my kids stand here, stick to the inside, go, they're running towards the wall, I got ball, they're breaking down at the wall, and then they're stopping as their stick just barely taps the wall. So it's kind of learning that depth perception of how far away am I, and then again, getting your stick in a straight line, so that in your approach, it ultimately comes right here into their gut, where there's no physical way for them to get their stick across their body without going over or trying to go under, or again, turning around and rolling. Okay, so hugely important there. The guys that do that take the ball away the most, and they don't throw checks, right? There's no check. It's just my stick's in here, attackman tries to make a split dodge, his stick hits my stick, he gets caught up, the ball falls down. No check required, no check necessary. Okay, so I always talk about you never want to start with a check. That's never the right way to start defense. It's not a poke check, it's not a lunge into his gut, I'm just walking my stick into his stomach so that he's got to deal with it as he dodges. Okay? Go ahead.
Is that also for a short pole too?
No, probably not. So short pole is going to be a little different. The way I'm going to teach that is more about playing your angles, and keeping your hands kind of in this cross check. So I've had some, there's some really good defensive short poles that do, time up that split dodge and maybe throw that poke check out in one hand, and I'm all for that. But, with the length of the stick, I think it's more important for the short pole to just be broken down and balanced and prepared to run and work to jam. Okay, so this is going to be specific to a long pole.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so once I go with that initial approach, my stick's in his stomach, and he starts moving, and a lot of times with my footwork drills, I'm going to get really comfortable in a back pedal with my stick here, right? Those first few steps, I break down whether it's a mid or an attack when he's running at me, I leave my stick there to a back pedal. Once he's committed to a direction, so once he's gotten out of kind of that straight line running and he's gone right or left, that's when I'll bring my stick sideways and I'll get prepared for a cross check. Okay, and I'm going to talk about cross checks, and again, I hope I'm not going to bend the rules too much here, but I cannot stand when I see this. All right, I don't care how young a kid is, there is no value in teaching your kids to choke your hands up to the middle of their stick to jam. All right, I understand that the refs say that your gloves have to be together. If they have to be all the way together, I'd rather see this. Okay, I don't want your bottom hand to come up off the bottom of the stick. It's a terrible habit, you're going to lose leverage, and then it's going to hurt you when you get to high school and you are allowed to cross-check, and your habit is to do this. And I see it all the time with high school kids that just have this habit. It goes back to the tape for me. If my hands are in the tape, I'm in freaking death grip. I'm not letting this hand move at all, right? I'm wide grip right here, and I'm playing defense like this. The second that ball's on the ground or offense, yeah, nice. Now your stick's your girlfriend. You hold it nice and gentle, you treat it soft, you're moving all over it. But when you're on defense, it's freaking lock down, lock my hand into the bottom of the stick and leave it there. So again, younger ages, it shouldn't be too long of a stick, right? If I've got a little kid this size using a stick this length, this is going to look really freaking awkward. Okay, but if the stick is reasonable length, he should be able to have both his hands pretty low on the stick, and we can jam that way. Okay, I would take it one further, and I would argue it's more about how we teach the cross-check. Okay, if we have kids running around punching straight out from their chest, yes, you're going to get cross-check calls. I'm going to get cross-check calls if I'm running around doing this. Where the jam has to happen is in a downward motion. All right, if you're cross-checking on somebody's hips at all ages, it's very rare that you're going to get called for a penalty. Okay, so that to me is more important than the gloves together. All right, again, I understand the rules, and I know that certain refs will call it that way, and so the adjustment I would then make is move your top hand down, but do not get in the habit of moving your bottom hand up off of the bottom of the stick. Okay? I'll work with my guys in just sitting in this low base, and again, building the muscle memory of this downward motion on my jam. I'm punching from my chest almost down to my knees. Right? And that way, the jam is going to come down onto their hips. If I knock them over doing that, they're most likely going to fold into me. Right? If I do this, somebody's coming around from behind from X, and I cross-check him in his shoulder, he's going to fall away from me, I'm going to get a push in the back. Okay, so I'm not ever trying to really get up on people's shoulders. Good attackmen would learn to just duck their shoulder, you're up on their neck, we get more penalties that way. So getting comfortable playing with my hands down here, you see a lot of defensemen, bigger, stronger guys, as they get run into them, and they're just locked out down here, and they're just practicing lifting there on his hips, especially if I'm guarding an attackman that's kind of a post-up type guy, then either I'm really low and I'm bench pressing, or if I'm a big, strong guy myself, I might just be here and just playing him with my body and trying to lift his hips out from that movement. Okay, but as long as I'm focused on his hips, as long as I'm low enough, and any jam that I throw is going in a downward motion, I think I can probably avoid any sort of cross-check penalty. Cool. All right, last thing here defensively, and again, I'm going to get into some approach angles, is just 3 checks. Okay, so the takeaway check, as all of us know, has kind of gone away largely because of the sticks and how good offensive guys are in terms of their ability to protect it. So I try to focus on using 3 checks. All right, a lift or a dig, which comes from never having my stick come out of his stomach. Okay, so I approach an attackman. My stick gets in his belly, and he starts running, and I'm leaving my stick there. Right? What attackmen are really good at often is, the second your stick comes off of them, they're expecting to be checked. So that's when they're going to pull it tighter to their body, or they're going to change direction. So I want to be able to throw a check from never having to leave my engagement with him. So if my stick's in his belly, what most attackmen are going to do is cradle with one hand. Right? So I leave my stick sitting right on this part of his stomach while he's cradling with one hand. Right? Again, unless he's Lyle Thompson, he's probably not going to score me with one hand, so I'm not super worried about that. I'm just going to leave it there. Let him run, let him do what he wants to do. He can look all day. Right? The second that bottom hand comes off his stick, that's that ring in my mind, he's trying to do something. He's putting 2 hands on a stick, he either wants to shoot or he wants to feed. Right? So that bottom hand comes off his stick, my stick's right here, really easy from that place to just lift. Requires no wind up, I'm never taking my stick off of him, I'm leaving it there, bottom hand, lift that bottom hand, see if I can't get him, or at least negatively affect his pass. Okay, same thing goes for Mitty running down the alley. He makes a move, he's going down the alley, I'm not close enough to get my hands on him, I'm just sticking my stick right in his gut, I'm waiting for him to put his elbows up to shoot, and I'm just going to lift right from that spot. Okay, the dig, or the other one I'll throw out of there, is if you can get your stick kind of in that gap, right, between their arm and their stick, a lot of times I can just throw that where I pull out. Okay, so my stick's right in his gut, he goes to put his second hand on his stick, and I'm able to kind of live in that area in there. Again, there's no wind-up required. I'm already in there, he puts his second hand on, and I'm just going to pull out and try to dig his stick out of there. Okay, you see a lot of guys that are really good at this, where they can kind of reach in with their one hand from one side, but I'm not teaching this as some big wind-up check. It's my stick's already in here, he's a midi, he's got 2 hands on a stick, and I can just kind of get in there and pull the stick out from his hands. Okay, so the lift and the dig are the 2 that I'm going to use if I can't get my hands on somebody. All right, the takeaway check that I'll try to throw is going to be a wrap. Okay, so what I guess a lot of us would consider a slap check, right, I kind of call it a wrap check because I think the difference between just making a kid say ow and actually getting the ball is the difference between the slap and the wrap. Okay, so the only time I use a slap check, the first time my kid gets the ball in the game, I'm just going to whack him as hard as I can and let him know I'm there. Okay, after that, there's really not a ton of value to just whacking on gloves. Lots of pads, right? Players, especially as you get older and players are better, you just learn that it's not going to do a whole lot. Just like I talked about with a lift or a dig, I don't want to pull my stick out first because I'm going to show that my check's coming. With a slap, okay, I always want to throw it from a time where I can jam first. Okay, so I'm not going to throw a slap if I haven't gotten my hands on somebody. My favorite time to throw a slap is if I'm engaged in a cross check. Okay, so most people think of a slap check, if I'm a right-hander, as being my right hand whacking somebody. Right? I think of the slap check as being my left hand. Right? If I'm engaged and my hands are on the defender and my arms are extended and I pull back, he knows the check's coming. Again, he's going to time it, he's going to pull it, he's going to roll it, he's going to hide it. Instead, I'll go from arms extended and I'll take my left hand and pull it to my right hip. Right now, the head of my stick's not coming back at all, it's just turning over right from there. Okay, and I talk about the difference between a slap and a wrap is a slap check. My right hand's still on my right side, my left hand's still on my left side. The wrap check, and where I think I can get a lot of takeaways, is by taking my left hand and punching it underneath my right hand. Right? And that causes the stick to kind of turn that corner around his body. Now again, this is a place where you can get penalties. Alright, so if you don't have the wrist strength to throw it and then still be able to pull it out, I'm probably not going to encourage you to throw it. I'm going to say jam, lift, dig, play good fundamental defense, and get on your wrist weights or whatever. Alright, but if I've got a kid who's got the wrist strength to do it, I love going from that jam position, he's leaning in on me, to boom, all of a sudden my stick's turning the corner, it's coming right across his chest. A lot of times, that's where you can get that check right there. Alright, part of that is, I need him to be going this way. I'm a right-hander, so this check's not going to work on the other side, right? Where the check can work in the other direction is right off of his butt. Right? If I have somebody that's running on me left-handed and he stops and he changes direction and he's going this way, and I was kind of engaged with him in the jam, right when he changed direction and goes back, now instead of up for the head of his stick, I'll go around his butt for the butt end of the stick, and again, a lot of times that's where you can see that stick go flying. Have to know where to throw it. If I'm above cage, I'm most likely not going to take that risk. If I'm behind cage and I know I have a little bit of an angle to catch up, he changes direction, I'll try that wrap around his butt, and then I'll get on my angle to make sure I can get top side, before we get above GLE. Okay, so what I'll do with kids a lot is I'll work on this jam check, right? Jam check. And part of that is the downward motion in the jam from my chest down into his hips, and then without bringing the head of my stick back at all, check, jam, check, jam, check. And just building in that muscle memory of there's no wind up in my slap check. The slap check comes with the left hand pull rather than the right hand pushing. Does that make sense? Cool. Awesome. All right, so then last thing that I kind of wanted to cover, and I don't even know where I'm at on time. Hopefully we're doing good. We're doing good. Very, very quickly is just off-ball defense, and I don't want to repeat anything that I know that's probably gone over, but I will say, I think probably the biggest gap, and it's not big. Lacrosse in Atlanta has come a long way, but the biggest gap for me is still off-ball offense, off-ball defense. Right? I think there's just a little more movement in some of the hotbeds, whatever you want to call them, or a better way to put it is even just graduating up levels from high school to college. Probably the biggest adjustment for me was just figuring out how to play off-ball defense. Again, I just think it's something that we probably don't do a good enough job of teaching at the youth level right now. So the one thing that I just want to go over, and I'll try to keep it simple, is the idea of if I'm the crease guy and I'm hot. Okay, so a lot of defenses we say crease is hot everywhere. Right? So whether it's behind or whether the ball's up top, we're sliding from the crease. The crease defender's hips should always be angled towards the middle of the field. Okay, where I'm susceptible to getting cut is the second that my hips are angled towards the outside of the field. And I'll show you where this happens. Right, let's say this desk here is a nice hefty crease guy that I'm covering. Right, so my stick and the ball is up in the alley. Right, so we're going to say the whiteboard is my goal in this imaginary scenario. Okay, so my stick is on my crease guy, right, and I've heard different coaches, switch hands off ball so your stick is here. Other coaches, go cross hand or make sure it's in the alley. Right, I'm a switch hands guy, but to me that doesn't really matter as long as my stick is accounting for him. And the ball is top right. So I'm prepared to slide right now to this spot. Well, when he passes that ball from top right to top left, what a lot of guys do is this. They come here, and now they're set up like this. Right? This is where my hips went from, again, I'm open up towards the dodger, but my hips, if I drew a laser out from my belly button, it would hit the middle of the field before it hit the sideline. When I come to this side, right, and I stay in the same setup, that same laser, the next thing it hits is the sideline. I have to turn and get set up on this side of him this way. Right? This is going to allow him to always be in front of me and not get me susceptible to a back cut. Okay? Where it's more important is if this were X. Okay, so, you know, now that's the back of the goal, and you guys are all standing at X, right? And I'm sorry, you guys are all at X, the goal would be in between us. And I'm on the crease preparing to slide, and I do the same thing. He runs through X, and I do this right here. This is where the good attack, and boom, he just cut that pipe. Right? My back is completely to him, and I've lost sight of him. So a better way, ball's back left, I'm hot, it gets passed back right. I want to remember who I'm guarding. Right? It's so frustrating to me when kids want to stare at the ball. It's be selfish. Don't let your guy score. So the second the ball transfers from one side of the X to the other, what my mind is telling me is stare at my guy. They can't score from back there. So I'm going to turn like this, stare at my guy, and then open up this way. And again, now my belly button, my hips are back towards the middle of the field. Then the ball moves up top, I'm this way. It moves across the top, again, I'm going to stare at my guy, and I'm going to open up this way. But no matter which way I'm set up, my belly button is always facing towards the middle of the field. And then I'm going to get my guy in one eye and the ball in the other eye. Right? And I think just kind of starting with that fundamental at a really young age, and kids get, you know, what I just did is how I'll practice that. All right, hey, here's the crease guy, I'll put a cone down, ball's back right, set up to be hot. I'm hot, ball's back left. This is what they want to do. Oh, he just cut, you got scored on. Okay, so how should I do that better? Ball's back right, I'm hot, ball's back left, stare at my guy, stare at my guy, stare at my guy, reset. All right, now ball's going up top, I'm hot up here, reset. Ball's on that side, stare at my guy, stare at my guy, stare at my guy, reset over here. Okay, so just helping them go around in those circles and getting used to always having their hips to the middle of the field, and then just the general awareness of this is your guy. Stop being so concerned. We've got Johnny on the ball, he's great. All right, give him a second. He's at least going to jam him up and buy you some time. Just get more focused around off ball, covering your guy off ball, being really good there. I think that's something that we, again, just need to really make an effort to cover more at the younger ages.
The only question is, they got to cover for the guy that beat the, when the guy's got the ball and beat his man, you sometimes have to cover in.
Yeah, so, but again though, you're still going to see that. Okay, so I'm set up here to slide. If he gets beat, I'm sliding.
Okay.
Right, so it's not about not going, it's about, if I'm standing like this, he might not even have to be beat. I start to kind of maybe just hedge, and my guy can cut me. Okay, so it's really
Show
just...
me the footwork of transitioning from you're on your guy to now you're going to slide. Show me the footwork, how you go from your belly facing the goal and inside to where you're going to come out to the slide.
Sure, yeah, so again, let's say the goalie is standing right here. Okay, so here's my crease guy, and the ball's up top.
Okay.
My belly's to the inside. Again, I'm going to open up some. I'm not going to just stand here with my back to the ball, but I want to start by essentially face guarding my man, and then depending where the ball is, open up from there. Right? So my footwork is going to be just a kind of a shuffle step towards it, and then and my stick will trail, and then as I've made the decision to go, I'm now going to turn and run. So now I'm completely putting my back to my guy.
You're going to completely rotate your
100%, exactly. But that's where, you don't want to make that turn until you've committed to the slide.
Got it.
So once I turn like this, even if I realize he's not beat, I'm going. I don't want to then stop and try to come back. Okay, so the way we would always do the drill at Loyola was hedge a few feet, and then he would give us a call, maybe we're getting back. Right, so that dodge is happening, I'm hedging, oh, we don't need to slide, I'm back. Right, and then maybe the next time, I'm hedging, okay, fire, and I'm going to go. Right, but it's just that fundamentals of staying sideways, of not letting your hips get square to the ball. And again, the place that happens, when the dodge happens, is he a threat, he's a threat, go. I think we get that pretty well. Where it happens is when they're just spinning the ball. And I'm just guarding the crease, and he just passes it over there, and I just do this for a sec. And he's gone. The attackman's moved, he's not there anymore. Or the ball's up top, right? And the ball gets thrown over to this alley, and I do this, and meanwhile, it's a mumbo, and he popped out the backside, and he's gone. All right, so that's where it's just coming back to the ball transfers from one player on another to the offense. Always stare at my guy first. Ball's here, it transfers there, stare at my guy, okay, reset here. Right, and okay, let's say I want to be quicker. So I want to go from this side to that side. Okay, maybe I turn my back for a sec, but then my awareness is get squared up to my man and then open up from my man to the ball. Good? Cool, so that's all. I think we're kind of at time, and that's all I had to cover, but I did want to, like I said, if there's any other questions or anything anybody wants me to speak on it, I'd be happy to do it.
You mentioned, having left-handed, right-handed switching hands. Somebody mentioned that something around there. Is it on the youth levels? Do you recommend that or not, or?
Yeah, so defensively, I don't recommend switching hands at all. Maybe you could find me a coach that does. I know you could find me a coach that does. And I'm not here to say that it couldn't work. Probably a defenseman out there that can do it. At the highest levels, every coach that I've been in touch with is strongly against it. I think you're just not quite as strong with your jams or with your checks in your left hand. You put the ball on the ground and now you're trying to pick up a ground ball left-handed. You know, what I would prefer is I'm staying in my strong hand, I'm staying with that grip, and obviously like I talked about, I'm jamming on hips. I'm using a V-hold if I have to use a V-hold, and I'm playing that way.
So you would recommend using angles more, so for a right-handed player on the left side, using a better angle to
Absolutely.
really force jam.
Absolutely, exactly. All right, and that's, those angles, and I was going to touch on that. If this is our cage, and I'm approaching the back side of this, Dodger that's over here where Coach Buckus is, right, the angle that I'm going to teach to approach that is what we call a flat approach, which means I'm out, and then I'm up. Because if I run at him on this angle on a straight line, my body language is asking him to go top side. Okay, so understanding that I want him to go to X, I'll just take a little shuffle and approach him here, so that now to go top side, he's got to go around me, right? And my body language is going to tell him to go towards X, right? Then once he's crossed X, the new fight in my mind is to get position of that side. So whether that's a V-hold or whether that's, my stick's on his back and I'm just fighting my hips over there, as soon as he gets across X, my new goal is to turn him back this way. So I always want the angle of my body to tell him where I want him to go, and anytime it's behind the cage, I always want him to go at X. My favorite spot on the field, they can't score from there. Okay? Same thing up top. If I'm approaching a midi in an alley and I want him to go down an alley, different with short poles. I think with a short pole, you teach him to come up and maybe turn sideways and cut the field. With a long pole, right, have you ever seen an NFL corner line up on a wide receiver like this? It's because it's bad footwork, right? Just because you turn sideways doesn't mean he can't go that way and now you're not beat. So what I would teach and what we were always taught at Loyola was if I'm approaching my man and I want him to go that way, instead of turning my feet like this, do the same thing a corner would do. Stay square and just take an inside approach on the angle. Put my outside shoulder on his inside shoulder. Now if he wants to come across my face, I'm meeting him with a two-handed jam. If he goes where I want him to go, I'm drop stepping and I'm going to run with him. So I'll still have my shorties sometimes get up and cut the field, but they've got to get all the way up in him. If I'm this far away from him and I'm standing like this is going to do nothing to make him go that way. He could still break me off and go that way. It's going to be much harder for me to drop step. With my long poles, I'm teaching him always to be square. I'm always square, and then depending on where I want him to go, I'll just overplay this side, or I'll overplay this side, and buy myself that extra half step in that direction. Cool. Anything else?
All I have to say is, sucks to be all those guys that left early.
Yeah, yeah.